Bella Vista Community Television presents Bella Vista and Beyond. Today our host is Abby Milam, and we will be talking about wine and chickens, the pioneer chickens. And now to the studio for our program.
Hi, welcome to Bella Vista and Beyond. I'm your host, Abby Milam, and I have some fantastic guests with me today. So I'm really looking forward to it, even though we're doing a little social distancing. I've got James King with me of King James Wine School and Wine Store. So this is going to be a really fun show because we get to talk about liquor and wine and all those fun things. So let me just introduce you and tell us a little bit about how you came to be in the Northwest Arkansas area and what your school is all about and all of those fun things.
So like a lot of other people, my spouse works for Walmart. And so therefore that brought us up here in 2016. I've actually lived in the US since 2002, but hopefully you can tell, hopefully I still have it. I still have the English accent.
No,
so
I can't hear anything. So it's just...
Exactly, thank you. But I've always been in the wine business, and when I moved to LA, I had a private wine business, and I started teaching certifications in LA. Then we moved to Texas, and in 2010 I set up the Texas Wine School, which still exists. And so when we moved up to here, I used the name King James Wine School. And so I teach, I'm the beverage arts director at Brightwater, the culinary school.
Oh, okay, nice.
So I do all that stuff there. And then I have a fine wine store, which is also a wine school. I just kept the name King James Wine School.
Wow, okay. So tell me a little bit about the certifications that you can get. Are you training SOMs and things like that? Or are you just, this is for everyday people, or a little bit of both?
There's sort of two streams in the wine world. One is the SOM world. One is what we call the sort of the Master of Wine world. I teach everything on the sort of the Master of Wine. So I do WSET, French Wine Scholar, Italian Wine Scholar. So anybody can take it. A lot of retailers will take it, a lot of distributors, a lot of wineries take those exams because it's very useful. So it's not service orientated, which is what the SOM exams are.
Right.
I have lots of consumers, I have lots of retailers who take it. And so it's very useful for both. If you're a consumer, it's awesome because you've got a lot more knowledge. And so then when you're going into a restaurant or a retail store, you can look at the shelves or the list and actually understand what most of the names mean and actually be able to purchase smartly.
Right, and that's hard to do because a lot of times you go into restaurants and the wine list is huge, and you if there's not a SOM, you really don't have any idea what you're doing. Right. You can say, I like Cabs, or I like Merlots, or I like Pinot Grigio, or whatever, but even then, sometimes those categories are huge, and right. You don't know which one's dry and which one's sweet, and right. all of those things. And like I was telling you earlier, when I went to culinary school, I took a wine course, and I was like, this is going to be amazing. And it was so difficult because there's so many different varieties of grapes and different land and different soils and all of those things. Yeah. So can you just give us a basic crash course in choosing wine? I know, just in like a
So you just said you went to culinary school and wine was difficult. Now you want me to put it in 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
All right, that's fair enough. First thing about wine is buy what you like. Full stop, end of story. If you like it, buy it.
Right.
It doesn't make a difference if it's $7 or $300, to be honest. Two, what I try and teach for most people is the labels for European wines. So when you see something like Sancerre, you have no idea what it is. But in reality, that's Sauvignon Blanc. So if you're a Sauvignon Blanc fan, you're going to love Sancerre. Okay. If you're a Merlot fan, you're going to love Saint-Emilion or Pomerol. So a lot of times when consumers come into my store or I have students, it's really trying to get them across of, yes, you like Cabs, or you like Merlots, or you like Pinots. Well, here is, in these other countries, where these grapes are grown, and this is the label you want to look for. So that's where you can be very sort of narrow. If I only drink Cabernet Sauvignons to, I now drink Cabernet Sauvignon from Pomerol, or from Tuscany, or from Northern Italy, or from Spain, or Australia. So you get this sort of wider, broad spectrum that you can actually now start picking from.
Make informed choices and decisions on what you like.
Correct.
That's interesting. Wow. So how long, if when somebody signs up for one of your classes, how long does a course usually last? Are you just drinking wine all day? Are you, no, that's not right. Tell us a little bit about how it goes and what to expect. So if somebody wants to, calls and says, I want to learn about wine.
So on the certifications, the sort of fundamental is theory is tasting and tasting is theory. So reading books and not actually tasting wine is pointless. And tasting wines but not understanding the backgrounds behind a region is also pointless.
Right.
Because ultimately, the courses are trying to give you the ability to assess the quality of wine. That's really what those certification courses are. And if I put your Merlot in front of you from Pomerol, and you go, I love it or hate it, but you've got no theory as to what the soil is, what the environment is, what the style is, then you really can't make a good judgment.
Right.
Is the way to look at it. So I do those. I also do consumer classes, which are much, much friendlier. They're 2 hours, $60, PowerPoint presentation. You still go into detail. So again, what I love is the education aspect is, so realistically, you're going into detail of what the different appellations are within, say, Bordeaux or France. Okay. And so what are the grape varieties? Sometimes what are the soils? And what are the different sort of characteristics and appellations within that region? So again, trying to get people to sort of step out of their sort of normal sort of bounds and step into something interesting and discovering. And
right.
That's where my sort of thing is discovery of wine is what it's all about. That passion. I don't want to drink the same Cabernet for the next 25 years.
Right.
I can go and buy Coca-Cola and do that every day of the year.
Right.
So it's like, what is it the wine that attracts you or wants you to delve and discover?
Right. Nice. Cool. Right. Well, so how are you finding Northwest Arkansas and the clientele here, and what people like? Does it vary a lot from, say, Los Angeles or Houston or all of the different places that you've had wine schools and all of these things? I mean, Northwest Arkansas is a unique place, so it's got a lot of people from all over the world, but it's also it's a little bit down home and all of those things. So yeah, how do you find your experience here and the wine courses in general and all of those things?
The reality is I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference of where you live. If you have that sort of inquisitive nature and want to sort of discover, and you've got slightly into wine, then that type of clientele is always going to come out of the woodwork and
right.
want to sort of discover more things, different aspects. And so 9 times out of 10, a lot of my customers and even my consumers are sort of pushing me to sort of bring in more diverse wines.
That's great.
So you have that fundamental, but you also have so many people, as you say, from LA, from Chicago, from New York, from Nashville or whatever, and DC. And the most satisfying thing that I get is that I had a customer from DC the other day, and he's literally like, this reminds me of a fine wine store in Georgetown.
That's awesome.
And it's like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so the diversity, we have wines from Mount Etna, we have wines from Corsica, we have wines from Sardinia.
And we really needed that here, I think. I think you're filling a spot that was really, really lacking here. In the South, I think everybody likes to have cocktails and all of those things, but I think, a good wine school and a good appreciation of wine and somebody who's knowledgeable about wine was really lacking in the area. So it's really, really good to have you here. It's really exciting for me, and I think for all of us here. I guess now I know that this is a difficult question. It's like when people ask you what's your favorite thing to cook or whatever. But if you had to say, just a good basic white wine that goes with chicken or pasta or something like that, how do you start to pair wines with food? I guess is kind of my question.
You started off really difficult. You made
I
it
really
easy
did. I really did.
Yeah. So when you were doing your culinary school, how did you pair wine with food?
I mean, for me, it was, thanks. For me, it was, like I said, it was really, the wine thing was so hard. I mean, it was, the different slopes of where it's grown and all of those things. So it got really difficult. And so, I just fell back on, what, if I like it, I'm going to drink it, even, if it's a $7 bottle of wine or if it's I never have a $300 bottle of wine, but, along those lines, I just kind of thought, and I think what I do probably isn't what the professional would do.
That's good deflection.
So
what we look at is simple things you look at is sweetness, acidity, to a certain extent umami, which I'm not going to go into a great deal, salt and lemon juice.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty much. So if you have, in simple terms, if you've got a wine which is, if you've got food which is sweet, your wine physically has to be sweeter.
So the dessert wines are sweeter, and that's something I haven't really gotten into either.
And so what a lot of people have problems is like, well, I'm doing a sweet dish, and therefore this dessert wine will work, which isn't necessarily true, because if there's more sugar in that dish than that wine, the sweetness of that wine will be reduced. And so you're not making any point. Another one when you think about is salt. So if you've got big tannic red wine, so the ones which sort of make you go, that type of thing. Was that really good? I'm not too sure.
I like that.
If you have that, if you add more salt to the dish, that softens down those tannins. So, so a lot of times Italian wine is sort of a classic example. A lot of it is high acidity, quite often sort of quite tough sort of tannins. So not great by themselves wine. You put them with food and bam, they're amazing.
See, and I didn't know these things. JB's over here taking notes and
So it's those type of things. Acidity, you want to have a wine which is equally as acidic as the food.
Okay.
So again, you think about, if you're going to do Italian, you think about that sort of tomato-based sort of dishes, lots of sweetness and acidity in those tomatoes. Therefore, you've got to do it with a relatively high acidic wine. And the reality is most European wines or cool climate wines are going to be higher in acidity than your New World wines. So a lot of New World being America, South Africa, Argentina, Australia. So a lot of those wines from the New World, America, let's take California, are generally lower acidity, richer styles, which doesn't actually make them perfect for food pairings compared to the Europeans.
What affects the acidity level of a wine? Is there? I'm getting too deep, aren't I? We don't have to do that.
You're into the pH and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, grapes have the DNA of a grape. Some grapes, like a Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc, are naturally high in acidity.
Okay.
So within the,
that's the simple
goes back to
answer.
the thing is like when you think about as a fruit matures, the sugar content goes up, the acidity goes down.
That's right. I remember that from school. And the ice wines too. What's the thing with the ice? The grapes are frozen before they're picked?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. That just came back to me.
That's good. I like that.
Thank you.
You did it in Switzerland, so there was ice wine in Switzerland. So.
I learned something. Yeah, that's true. There is. Okay, well, so that's all good to know. I mean, this is good information for people to have. Just if you're going in and you're just an everyday person trying to say like, I want to start to try to pair things together, but I don't really know how to do it. But that gives them a good head start. Yeah. Are the red meat dishes for different from fish and chicken and things like that? You want to separate those things entirely, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was the old sort of one which was red wine, red meat, white wine, white meat. Now, in this day and age, if you sort of think about it, you've got, let's say, a piece of chicken. How are you cooking it? Are you grilling it? Are you smoking it? Are you roasting it? Are you steaming it? Are you pan frying it? All those different characteristics, and then what sauce are you putting it in?
Right.
So when you suddenly look at that changes it from it would purely be this particular grape variety to it could be a dozen different grape varieties, and it could be Pinot Noir if you're grilling it or roasting it.
So you can go red and white. Now it's kind of like no white after Memorial Day. Those things have kind of gone by the wayside, and there's a lot of different variations.
Because you think about the sauce, you think about the actual cooking technique makes a huge difference. I mean, something which is steamed, a piece of chicken which is steamed, is going to have a completely different flavor profile than what is roasted.
Absolutely, and if it's covered in mushroom sauce or cream sauce or wine sauce, or anything like that. What about cooking with wine? How do you feel about that? Are there rules there?
I don't want to upset the chef in the room, but what we would traditionally say is that the quality of the wine you would drink has to match the quality of wine to a certain extent of what you put into the food. Because if you think about it, it's another ingredient. So would you put in, dried out, dirty old parsley as a sort of in your food?
Right.
You would never do it because it's the quality. So why would you put in a $2 bottle of wine into your food to cook with it?
That's true.
Now, I'm not saying you should go to a 50 or 100, but reality is you should have some quality in that wine.
Do something that you would also like to drink, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Because it does cook out, but you also still have a lot of that flavor. And if, like you said, if it's not a great wine, it's gonna affect your dish. You put all that time into a dish and then ruin it with a little bit of wine, and that's no good.
Correct.
Cool. Well, tell us a little bit about how you sign up for your classes and how to get in touch with you, and how to get in touch with the liquor store and the wine bar and everything.
So a couple of things. Obviously, the classes aren't going at the moment.
Ah, that's right.
Hopefully, they'll be back. Hopefully, in September, we'll start doing the classes again. Online, so kingjameswineschool.com online, you can sign up for classes. You can order online wine, and you can pay online for wine, and then you can do curbside pickup. That's the other thing. And so all the wines on the website are up to date, have information about the winery, about the tasting notes, about wine and food pairing. You can come to the store, which is 3511 Southeast J Street, at the bottom of Walton and basically J Street. And also, I suppose the other thing is, I'd like to sort of say, and hopefully you get this from this interview, is that wine shouldn't be pretentious.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll see that I'm not pretentious. And so even though I call it a fine wine store, what I mean by that is I believe there's fine wines at $10 all the way up to $300 or $400. And so there should be wines that you will like across that whole broad range.
I love that. That's great. And it's true. And yeah, I think that has come across. Cool. Thank you so much for coming. It's been really a pleasure talking to you. Everybody go and check out King James Wine. And we're going to take a break, so we'll be right back.
Thank you.
We will be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Here is our host, Abby.
Hi, welcome back, everyone. I've got our next guest with me who is equally awesome, and we are going to talk all about chickens. This is Matt Wadiak, and he is the owner of Cook's Venture out in Decatur. I had the pleasure of going out there yesterday, and they let me go and let the chickens out and do all the things. So it was really cool, and I'm excited to have him here and talk about their heritage chickens and what makes them different. I'm going to be using them at the restaurant, and that's, it's really exciting. So Matt, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to have you on the farm yesterday.
It was so fun. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So I got to experience that. Can you give the people at home a little background on what you guys are doing out there and what makes Cook's Venture so special?
Absolutely. So as everyone knows, there are a lot of different chicken companies in America, but what makes us very unique is that we are the only chicken company left in the United States that has no attachment to the two large genetics companies that breed all of the chickens for retail and food service use all over the US. So we're an independent, vertically integrated breeder and operator focused on heritage line breeds and bringing those heritage birds to the public like you.
It's so important. I mean, there's so many things that are added to chickens today, and I think everybody knows by now all of the chemicals and antibiotics and all of those things, and I know that y'all don't do any of that. And also, I was really impressed just by how clean everything was and how well cared for the birds were. It's sustainable. It's also just, humane for the birds. I mean, until we eat them, you don't want everything just packed in. And I know that, the big companies do that. They just pack all the birds in. They're dirty. They can't walk. They can't fly. They can't eat and forage and do the things that they should be doing. And I loved that, they're just all kind of spread out, doing their own thing, jumping and running and all of those things. So it was really neat. So tell us about how you got back to doing that with these birds and how you.
Yeah, it's a long story in that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what's in a chicken and what's in the foods that we buy at the grocery store. So when you go to the store, you look at a packaging. First thing you do is you read the labels and the accreditations that's associated with chicken or a piece of beef or a piece of pork or whatever. So actually, I'm a chef by trade. I started cooking back, in the 1990s when I was in high school. It dates me a little bit, but so spent about 20 years cooking professionally. And one of the things that became really important to me over the course of many years when I started getting into commercial food businesses and sort of left the restaurant scene and started an e-commerce company, we were serving a lot of meals to a lot of people all over the country, and our business grew very quickly in providing food for people. And one of the things that I was very conscious of is I wanted to serve our customers the kind of food that I would want to cook for my guests in a restaurant or when I had my family and friends over for dinner. providing that level of access to high quality food. So one of my legacy great friends from the old restaurant days is a guy named Bill Nyman from Nyman Ranch, who started the antibiotic, removing antibiotics from meat all over the country with cattle and pigs and most recently turkeys. So Bill and I were traveling all over the U.S. trying to find a better chicken, a chicken that wasn't hyper commercial, but that was still affordable and accessible to most Americans. And what we came up with is, coming down to Arkansas, there was a gentleman by the name of Blake Evans over here in Decatur, and he had a beautiful piece of land, an 800-acre facility with about 70 buildings on it that are focused on heritage breed selection and breeding, and had built a scaled operation. So Blake and I ended up partnering up, and my former company was Blue Apron. I was one of the founders of Blue Apron, and then I actually left BA and started this chicken business in partnership with Blake to really focus on how do we provide this kind of food that I'd been out there seeking, and really trying to create this accessibility to Americans in better scale. And that was really important because the two main breeds of chickens that exist in the world today comprise about 99+% of all the birds we grow as a nation.
That's crazy, isn't it?
And they were created by the same guy from the University of Edinburgh back in the 1970s. And one of them is called the Ross 308. It's from a company called Aviagen. And the other one is over here in our neck of the woods, the Cobb 500 from Cobb, which a lot of folks know is owned by Tyson. The main issue with those birds is they're very fast growing and they produce a lot of meat very quickly. But the downside of that is those animals go through a lot of suffering with that hyper fast growth. They have a lot of pain, they have leg issues, and there's a really high mortality associated with those animals. So from an animal welfare perspective, there's some room for improvement there. And additionally, on the farming side of that, when you have to work in those sort of confinement environments as a farmer here, as a lot of folks in Northwest Arkansas do, the air quality is not so good. It's difficult. It's not an easy job. So
there's nothing good about it, I don't think, as far as working in it or consuming it or any of those things. It's probably not pleasant on any level for anyone, for the birds, for the humans, for anything.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, a lot of folks who have built farms and built poultry operations on their properties, they're oftentimes signing leases for these very expensive buildings, which are $500,000 or $600,000 per farming unit, per chicken barn. And
you're just talking about the chicken coop itself, or the chicken house?
The whole barn, these big sort of 40,000 square foot barns.
And you see them all over,
They're all over, they're everywhere. And that farmer is then, maybe a couple years later, even if they're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, this is not for me, I'm not happy with the animal welfare, I'm not happy with the quality of life, I can't take vacation, I'm now a slave to these, row house operations.
Right.
So how do you get out of that? How do you create, a paradigm shift if those folks now have 20, 30-year loans to their banks sometimes, and they lose their whole farms if they don't continue to sort of feed into that system? So, beyond just the bird itself, you have to have a bird that can live to go outside. Because if you put those mainstream broilers outdoors, their mortality becomes very, very high. They just don't live well in those conditions. And the second thing is, how do you create an economic model where farmers can afford to renovate old housing or do things where our renovation versus the traditional system, which is like $500,000 per house, is like $10,000, $15,000 to renovate a chicken house, to cut some holes in the sides, let the birds outside, hang hay inside the house like you saw yesterday,
it's
put
wonderful.
in perch. And now farmers can afford to get into a farming system that's cost effective for them, where they can make a better quality living and have an actual income.
And be happier and enjoy what they're doing.
Exactly. Be in nature.
It struck me too that, I know that a lot of times you read on packaging, it's organic, it's free range, and all of those things. And I know that is not true in a lot of cases. Let's just say that it's not true. I think, what is it, that they have to have a door on the chicken house, and then that's considered free range, but they're not going outside at all, and they in fact can't even walk. So it really struck me yesterday how these birds are just like playing and running and jumping around, and are exposed to all of those things. So it's really important to me, and I know to you as well, being chefs, what we put in our bodies. And I think it's a little bit easier for us because we know, a lot about these things. But I think for the everyday person out there doesn't know, if they see organic or they see free range, they say, hey, that's great. I'm making a difference. So I think it's really important that we make that shift and we make that distinction on what we're putting in our bodies and the feed that they're being fed. Yesterday when I was out there, I thought it was so cool that the meal that they have has apple cider vinegar in it, which is it's so good for humans. So it's obviously good for the birds, and it's like a bit of an antibiotic and all that stuff too. So it's really great. I loved being out there. So.
Yeah, promoting natural gut health through like stuff like fresh herbs, through charcoal that the birds can eat it, which is really good for their gut. Just like for people, through apple cider vinegar, which is antimicrobial in a natural way, is really good. And that's one of the benefits if you treat your birds really well. In the 10 years since our company started, we've never had to medicate a single flock because the avian health is so good. And that's from the breed and the feed and the living environment. So if you have really those three things down, you can create scalable systems that are cost effective. And
you don't
really
need to
pump
them full of antibiotics and drugs and things like that are harmful to them and harmful to us as well.
That's right. Yeah. And additionally, like one of the things that is a positive byproduct of that from a culinary standpoint is obviously when you treat animals really well and you have better breeds, they taste better.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
A lot of folks who are, sort of in the boomer and beyond generation who are trying our chickens are saying to us, wow, this is like the chicken we grew up with. And, I go to the grocery store now and I buy a bird and it doesn't taste like a chicken anymore. It tastes like, a rubber hose.
Yeah, and it's got that really weird, chewy consistency. Sometimes now when I do eat stuff like that, it almost tastes like the meat is raw, but it's not. But it's got that chewy, weird consistency.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. From a breeding standpoint, what's happened over the course of the last 50 years or so, and I'll try to keep it high level, is that birds have been selected for larger muscle fibers so that they could grow more quickly and feed more quickly. So what happens through those large muscle fibers is a large muscle cell actually holds more water. It's basically like a tube that holds water. So those birds grow quickly because they're converting feed and water, and they're becoming bloated very quickly. So what you need from the osmosis, from the pressure within the cell, is you need a thicker cell, and a thicker cell, of course, when you bite the chicken breast, leads to that kind of bouncy, rubber hose consistency,
right.
And that's actually called woody breast. And there's also another condition called white striping, which is really popular in the mainstream breeds. But when you have a heritage line bird that's growing in a more thoughtful, slow process, the cell structure is finer, and therefore when you eat it, it retains moisture. It's not as bouncy and springy. It's a lot more tender and delicious.
So tell me about the difference in time that you grow a chicken versus a conventional chicken.
Yeah. So a mainstream broiler these days will grow to 6 or 7 pounds live in about 38 days, 42 days on the very high end of that. Our birds are between 55 and 65 days to get to a lesser weight, to get to about 5.5 pounds live. So that's a really big deal. When one of the things that we really look for in our animals is we're always trying to find birds that put on strong bone structure early in their life so they can be upright, walk around, go outside like you saw yesterday. Good organ development, good lungs, good strong hearts, and a nice coat of feathers.
Clear eyes, and I touched their
eyes.
little paws yesterday, and they're soft, and they're out running around. It was really, really impressive, and I think it's long overdue. So I'm really excited that you guys are doing this. It was such a pleasure to meet both of you and Blake and see all the things. So tell us a little bit about where we can get your chicken and all of those things.
Yeah, so you can buy our chickens from KT Produce if you're a chef out there like yourself, and they're great partners of ours. And then if you're in the area around here in Northwest Arkansas, you can go to Whole Foods in Fayetteville and pick up our birds in Arkansas and Oklahoma. So we're really excited to partner with those folks, and we have a lot of new folks in the pipeline that we're talking to too. Also, a lot of local farmers markets have been carrying our birds too lately.
That's great. That's great. And I am going to also be using you guys and hopefully selling some stuff so people up here in Bella Vista don't have to drive all the way to Fayetteville to Whole Foods to get them.
Yes.
But it's really, really exciting, and I love everything y'all are doing out there. So you were with Blue Apron before. Tell us a little bit about what you did with Blue Apron and how you ended up
Sure.
here in Arkansas from that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you were looking for the heritage breeds.
Yeah. So I was a founder and chief operating officer, so I managed all of our supply chain and all of our operations throughout the company. So we had fulfillment centers in Dallas, Texas, in New Jersey, New York, and Northern California. So really built that from the ground up, and the goal with that, being a cook myself, was to try to encourage people to cook more at home. And as part of that mission, use of quality ingredients is really, really important. So finding partnerships we ended up working with about 250 local farms to our distribution centers, and cultivating really like a network of community farmers who were really feeding into our system, and we were able to supply our customers all over the country with those ingredients.
And that's what you're doing here. And I love that. I feel like you're kind of going all over the country and trying to just improve the food that we eat and the awareness and all of those things, which I think is so rare and so great. And I love that you're getting out there and doing the farmers markets and all of those things. So we're gonna keep pushing your stuff out there, and I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did. If I think you guys are gonna do an education center out there too. So
yeah, we're looking at building an education center and having different chefs and culinary groups and kids come up, from schools and trying to provide more education around agriculture generally, farming systems that incorporate animals in more natural organic systems. And we're really excited about just providing that context and that different kind of lens to see how we can do things in scale and also be environmentally conscientious.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming today. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure yesterday. And everybody go out there and get some Cook's Venture chicken.
Thanks, and I will be eating at your restaurant very soon.
Great, thank you.
Take care.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. And thank you again for our anonymous donors for these wonderful lights that aren't so hot. I appreciate you coming.
Remember, you can see this program on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at various times. You may also see this program on YouTube.com by going to Bella Vista TV. This has been a presentation of Bella Vista Community Television. Thank you for joining us.